All right, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. It's a nice turnout, and it's glad to see the interest in the project. This is truly a team project. It's a collaboration between the University of Montana, the city, and Montana Department of Transportation. I'd like to just acknowledge some of the team members that are here with the University of Montana. Jerry Ballas has put quite a bit of work into it. Jamil Chaudhry is here. He was integral in the early stages of the project. Hugh Jesse, Bob Derringer, they're not here tonight, but they've also been important partners. And TJ Johnson, he's had some input on the safety concerns of the university. From the city, Steve King, Director of Public Works, Kevin Slovarp, the city engineer, council members Stacy Rye and Bob Jaffe are here. We'd like to thank them. And also the administration and the entire council. Renee Mitchell is here. Sorry about that, Renee. And the entire council, they were helpful in creating the special improvement district that helped fund this project. Montana Department of Transportation, we've worked with the local district. Doug Moeller, I've seen him here. Shane Stack and Ben Nunley have been helpful. And then down from Helena, Ivan Olberg, who is in their traffic department. And WGM, Brent Campbell, Jeremy Keene, and Mark Bancal will be doing some presenting this evening. So that's a team. Wanted to talk about why we're here. And essentially it was a problem, that got us here to work towards a solution. The problem was that Highway 12 traffic gets diverted into the university area. It gets diverted into some high conflict intersections at Maurice and 5th, Maurice and 6th. A past project, which was a larger federal project that MDT did a environmental assessment on as part of the NEPA process, and NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act. They went through that process, and it was a comprehensive project at that point to address capacity and safety concerns. Ultimately, it wasn't strongly supported by the majority of the public, and it didn't have funding. And so the result of that process was they reached a no-build decision. And so here we are today. The problem still exists, and the university approached the city to see what we can do to not do the big ultimate project that's going to address capacity, but do something in the interim, because there's still safety concerns at the intersections I mentioned earlier. So we created an SID, a special improvement district, with the University of Montana as the primary assessee, and that went through the council process and the public process, and it was created earlier in the summer. The city will administrate the project and contribute some in-kind labor, and Montana Department of Transportation, they'll do their review and approval of the traffic turn movements, and because it's Highway 12, they have to be involved with the process, and have been very good to work with. And they will also be furnishing signals. There's going to be an upgraded signal at 6th Street and an added signal at 5th Street. And the primary, the big part of this project will be adding a northbound lane. So if you're going northbound on Arthur and you just intend to travel across the bridge and go into town or go out onto I-90, you'll be able to continue through over the bridge without being diverted to 5th, 6th, and Maurice intersections. And so this will reduce the conflicts at those points. As part of improving safety, the intersections of 5th and Arthur, 6th and Arthur, Maurice and 6th, and Maurice and 5th will all be improved. And I'm not going to get into all the details because Mark's going to give a detailed presentation with a lot of graphics. We have had one meeting previously with BWAM, MIST, MAST, ASUM. We had quite a bit of input, and we're here partly to show them what we've incorporated and are carrying forward with the design. And we're here also to hear from you, a broader audience, to get your input. And then we'll take this input, we'll see what we can fit into the project, fit into the budget, and work with MDT on approvals, and then we can really move forward with the final design. I am going to circulate right now. We weren't quite set up when you got here, so we're going to circulate sign-ins. If you'd please sign in. And I'll also pass around this. It is a comment. You can give us information, comments. If you want to fill them out at your leisure, get them up to the city or get them to WGM, that would be fine. Mark will give you a web address where you can also link to fill one out electronically. So we'll pass those out. I'd like to introduce Mark Bancal's with WGM. He's going to be doing a presentation in a few minutes. At this time, I'd like to introduce Nancy Wilson with ASUM. She wanted to make a few comments. Thank you very much.
It's great to sorry. It's great to see everybody here. I just wanted to say a few comments. ASUM Transportation and ASUM, which is the Associated Students of the University of Montana. The last time this project came forward, we were opposed to the project because it had really wide intersections, and there was a lot of things that didn't work. And we really wanted to say tonight that the Senate and the Transportation Board are really pleased to see how well this project has come together, that the cooperation and the everyone worked together to make this project still address all the safety for transportation options and still help the traffic flow work correctly. And it's really nice to see that this project came together so well and has now turned into a real neighborhood-friendly, university-friendly project that I think is really going to help us continue to promote biking, walking, busing to campus, but also allow traffic flow. And really, that east side of this project is going to be so much better than it is currently for people to access the university, that we're really excited for you to see it. And we wanted to let you all know that we have full support of student government of this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. My name is Mark Bancal. I'm a traffic engineer at WGM Group here in Missoula. And I'm very pleased to see such a large turnout this evening. Thank you all for coming, spending some time with us, and hopefully learning quite a bit about what we're planning to do. That's my intent. I'm going to begin a presentation here in just a few moments, provide a little bit of background. Greg already did a real good job of that, so I'm going to move quickly through the first half dozen or so slides. Then show you a little bit, or talk a little bit about the traffic analysis that was done that formed the basis for the proposal, and then get into the details of what we are looking at doing at each of the individual intersections. I would ask if you have any questions that you hold those until the end of the presentation. I'll try to move through it as quickly as I can. And then we have folks here both from the university and the city, as well as Jeremy and myself, to help answer those questions when they come up. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. First of all, can everyone see the screen, or is there a way to dim the lights? Is that necessary?
Necessary.
It is necessary. Can we do that, please?
Yes.
Before I go any further, I'm going to ask for two things. I'm going to remind you that the sign-up sheet is going around. Please sign your name and move it along. Whoever has that last, if you could bring it to the front. I've prepared about 50 comment forms. I think there's more like 100 people here tonight. Maybe not everybody will have a comment they need to write down. So if you don't feel you need one of those, pass those along. If you do fill out a comment and you want to leave it here tonight, you can leave that also up here on the table, or you can mail it to us at your convenience when you're through. Additionally, if you don't get one of those forms and you have a comment you want to submit, you can go to the WGM Group website. Sometime tomorrow we will be posting, probably in the first few hours of the morning, posting this presentation on our website, which is WGMgroup.com, and there will be a link there to the presentation, and also some way for you to provide written comments, perhaps my email address as a link or some other form. So please, if you don't get one of those forms, doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. So a little bit of background. Whoops. There we go. As was mentioned by Greg, this all kind of started way back in 2001 when the MDT, the city, and the university signed a memorandum of agreement to look into doing improvements at what was then known as the 5th, 6th, and Arthur project. There was an environmental assessment. The 5th, 6th, and Arthur EA was prepared over a period of 5 or 6 years. A 5-lane alternative was identified in that as the preferred alternative. It looked something like this. This is a graphic from one of those documents. You could see that there was a real emphasis on widening Arthur. This project, as it was proposed in that CADX, didn't have a lot of community support, and there was no federal funding available for it. So ultimately, the no-build decision was arrived at for that project. However, the need for the project didn't go away just by saying we're not going to build this one. The need continued to persist. The university felt it probably most keenly because it's right here at one of their primary entrances. And they approached the city and as well as WGM Group and said, is there something we can do in the interim, not this full project that doesn't have support and can't be funded, something else that would address the safety concerns, maybe without totally addressing the traffic analysis, the traffic volumes of a 20-year projection, which is what the previous project tried to do. Some of those issues that we needed to address included high pedestrian and bicycle volumes. There's probably more mixed modes of use at this intersection than there is anywhere else in the city of Missoula. Not at this intersection, but within these 4 intersections, this project area, than anywhere else in the city of Missoula, possibly anywhere else in the state of Montana, between cars, buses, trucks, bicycles, and pedestrians, and the volumes of each. Also, high traffic speeds were a concern, primarily coming down this leg of Madison. Poor levels of service at some movements at some of the intersections, primarily over at 5th and Maurice. It's a classic intersection problem. There was also a lot of crashes in the area. 90 crashes were recorded in the project area during the time frame that I did a crash analysis of, which was from July of 2002 through the end of 2008. There were 90 recorded crashes, ranging from minor fender benders to one actual pedestrian fatality that occurred over in the vicinity of 6th and Maurice. There were, at the intersection of 5th and Maurice, 26 crashes that included 12 vehicles that were struck after leaving the westbound stop sign. So as you know, if you drive this in the afternoon, there's a lot of delay at this intersection, and folks, when they finally got their opportunity at the stop sign, are accepting gaps that maybe are a little bit less than they ought to be, being a little too aggressive, resulting in crashes of this westbound vehicles being struck by the northbound Maurice Avenue traffic. And then also 24 crashes over here at 5th and Arthur. Again, 12 of those being vehicles that left the stop sign, entered the intersection, and then were struck by traffic coming down Madison off of the bridge. So these were some of the safety issues, and then just the sheer volume of Highway 12 traffic passing immediately adjacent to the university campus was also something of a concern to the university. The current project started, as I mentioned, with the university wanting to see something still done. We had discussions with MDT. MDT owns the right-of-way of Highway 12. US Highway 12 is a federal route and it goes right through this study area. So MDT is a key partner in this. They have been involved since the beginning, first with the 5th, 6th Arthur project, and now with this current project. We put together a conceptual design, provided that to MDT, got feedback. We're in the process of responding to that feedback. And Greg mentioned earlier on, the funding for the construction is primarily going to be through an SID on the university, as well as the city providing labor for some of the construction where they have that expertise available, and MDT is going to be contributing a significant amount of the equipment for the traffic signals. The project purpose, simply stated, is to address basic safety issues associated with a high volume of pedestrians, bikes, and motor vehicles entering the University of Montana campus and passing through on US Highway 12. The goals and objectives, I'll just move through these quickly. I'm not going to read all of them. A couple of the key ones, however, are to maintain an appropriate level of service for an urban arterial highway route for the current traffic volumes. And that word current is key here. I want to emphasize again, this is not a capacity improvement project. This is to address safety concerns, bicycle and pedestrian connectivity concerns, but not 20-year traffic volume forecasts. So when we did our traffic analysis, we looked at current traffic volumes. We're going to incorporate physical changes to the roadway to increase the safety, comfort, and convenience of all modes of the traveling public. When we say all modes, we're focusing there on bicycles and pedestrians. Of course, as well as automobiles, but automobiles are already pretty well accommodated out here. To reduce outer direction travel on US 12 and remove through traffic from the campus. Because you have to go around on 6th and then up Maurice to get onto Madison and cross the bridge, you are driving further out of your way, producing more emissions, using more gas and more time. And with the improvements that are being proposed here, all of those things can be reduced. And then the other items here, I'll just leave for you to read. And if you really want to study them, you could look it up on the website. So we did a preliminary traffic analysis. This analysis was to satisfy the city that what we're looking at is not going to result in a lot of congestion. And it is to satisfy MDT that what we're proposing here is something that will be acceptable on a US highway route. Let's not forget, this is US Highway 12. I'm going to keep saying that because it's a not insignificant factor in everything that we do here. And so what we did in the analysis is we did traffic counts back in the spring when the university was in session, did manual traffic counts at each of the intersections, and did analysis of those. Part of what you saw earlier while you were waiting for the presentation to begin, the simulation on the screen, was part of that analysis. And we will, for those of you who might be interested, when the presentation and the question and answer period is done, if I remember, we'll put that simulation back up again, and if you have any questions about it, just seek me out and I'll be happy to talk to you about those. Excuse me. So what we found from the traffic analysis is that, first of all, a 3-lane system can provide a reasonable level of service under, again, the existing traffic volumes. That a long-term traffic growth will eventually create congestion and delay. This is perhaps, in some ways, an interim solution because it's not looking at 20 years, 30 years of traffic growth. And that traffic growth, interestingly enough, has been relatively flat since 2002. Manual counts were done in 2002 as part of the original EA. and we did ours, and there was little to no in growth at these 4 intersections when looked at as a whole during the peak hours. So that was interesting to note. We did some capacity analysis, some network-wide measure of effectiveness evaluation, and what we found is that the overall project area network will experience improved traffic conditions. That total delay in the AM peak hour actually increases slightly because of the introduction of a new traffic signal and the reconfiguration, but that the total delay in the PM peak hour decreases substantially. You can see the numbers here on the right-hand side. Total delay and delay per vehicle reductions in the neighborhood of 75%. And fuel consumption reduction in the neighborhood of 30%. So while there's going to be some inconvenience introduced in the AM peak hour, it's far more than offset by the improvements realized in the PM peak hour. So enough about the traffic analysis. Let's talk about what you came here to find out tonight, and that is just what is being proposed. The biggest difference, and Greg touched on this earlier, the key thing that we're doing that makes this different and that allows us to make improvements at other locations within the project area is to add a northbound travel lane on Arthur Avenue. So currently if you come up Arthur to 6th Street, your only option is to turn right. We are going to add a through lane northbound on Arthur, working primarily within the existing curbs, which is one of the key differences between this project and the earlier project is we're trying to the greatest extent possible, work on the existing pavement. And on Arthur Avenue, we're able to do that with the exception of this quarter of a block right in here, the east side, the south half of the block. Because of the truck turning through here, we needed to widen a little bit to provide a truck turning apron, and we'll see that in a little more detail later on. Once you head north up Arthur and you reach 5th Street, you can then continue on up what is a new lane and is new asphalt and is widening. Just be real clear about that, along this side of Jeanette Rankin Park. So we still have the 2 lanes southbound coming down and now 1 added northbound lane in addition. So that is the primary biggest difference you're going to see out here. We're going to update the traffic signal at 6th and Arthur with new vehicle detection and pedestrian detection. We're going to be putting in a new traffic signal at 5th and Arthur. Intersection improvements at all the 4 intersections. Improved bike routing and sidewalk improvements. And finally, updated pavement markings and signs throughout the project area. I'm going to go through each of the 4 intersections here, try to move through those as quickly as we can. We're going to talk about existing conditions and then what we're proposing to change. So the intersection of, let me go back one. I'm going to go through these intersections in this order just to orient everyone. North is up on this figure. We're going to start here at 6th and Arthur, go to 5th and Arthur, then talk about this area up in here a little bit. Then we're going to come down to 6th and Maurice, and then finally talk about 5th and Maurice. So 6th and Arthur, the existing conditions here that we felt really needed to be aware of because either we were aware of them or the folks from the public that we've already talked to brought them to our attention as key considerations in their mind, included the following. Long pedestrian crossing distances across the intersection. No crosswalk, and for that matter, the prohibition of pedestrian crossings here. Because of the way this signal currently operates, there's always traffic heading in this direction, whether from this left, this right, or this through movement. So there's never the opportunity for pedestrians to cross here. That will change. The bike lane, northbound on Arthur, currently ends at this intersection. It's difficult for left turns for bicycles coming south. You have to make your way across the traffic to this lane to make the left turn. Events traffic entering the university. Truck turning. Then what we are proposing then, in order to address these items, is an updated traffic signal, which I've already mentioned. Bulb outs at the corners. Bulb outs provide a couple of key key opportunities. One, it gets the pedestrian a little bit further out, so they're more in view of the traffic, the vehicular traffic. It provides a shorter crossing distance for pedestrians also, and provides an area for some streetscaping, as well as the protection of the on-street parking with the bulb out. You'll see these bulb outs at all the intersections as we go through this. A new crosswalk on the east leg, so there'll now be crosswalks at this intersection on all 4 legs. A new bike lane eastbound here on 6th Street. So what you'll see is that there's now only 1 lane eastbound on 6th. Instead of parallel parking on 2 sides and 2 vehicular lanes eastbound, there's now 1 vehicular lane, 1 bike lane, and angled parking on the north side. The angled parking is currently illustrated as back-in angled parking. That may become head-in angled parking before this is all said and done. When we add this northbound through lane here, that obviously opens up the opportunity for northbound Arthur Arc traffic to go through. Also opens up the opportunity for the Highway 12 traffic to make a left turn. And so this lane, which is now a through-only lane, will become a left-only lane. So it'll be left-only, through-only, bicycle lane on the west leg. A shared bike lane, 15 and a half, I believe that says, 16 and a half perhaps, feet wide. A dedicated bike lane on the south side, a shared bike and vehicle lane on the north side. We'll talk a little bit more about why that changed here after a bit. A bike box here on the southbound approach, the purpose of which is to allow bicycle traffic, if it arrives on the intersection on red, to pass by the vehicle traffic and move out in front of it to make itself much more visible, get a jump on into the intersection, heading over to the bike lane on the south side when the light turns green, and also to position itself to make the left turn more safely. Truck apron here on this side. We talked a little bit earlier about that widening in here so that this left turn can be made by larger vehicles. And a single lane entry with option for 2 lanes during events. One of the things we have to bear in mind is that there's a lot of traffic entering the university, whether it be for sporting events, concerts, etc. And there are times when the university wants the flexibility to allow 2 lanes of traffic entering. And during those times, part of the reason that this is striped rather than a concrete bulb out is to allow through traffic from this lane. This parking would be removed during that period of time, be signed in advance, and you would have 2 through lanes of traffic moving eastbound on 6th Street on occasion. So that's what we're going to do with this project. If budget allows, when the bids are received and if there's enough money left over, a couple of things that we'd like to add would be some green pavement markings, presuming that the city and the state can agree that that's something that they're willing to see out there and maintain. That would be an advantage, particularly in the bike box, would help it to really stand out. As well as special crosswalk treatments. Those might be stamped colored asphalt, or they might be concrete crosswalks, depending on kind of where the preference lies. The intersection of 5th and Arthur, again with the existing conditions. Things we were made aware of were the high vehicle speeds coming down Madison. The high right turn volume, which is that Highway 12 traffic volume, and the fact that there's no crosswalk there. There's no crosswalk because it's simply not safe for pedestrians to cross there with the high volume of traffic coming down off of Madison, at least during peak times of the day. There's also no crosswalk on the north leg. Events traffic exiting the University of Montana is something we also need to continue to bear in mind. So what are we proposing? A new traffic signal. Because this traffic here coming northbound on Arthur didn't used to be there, and all the other traffic that always has been there will continue to be there, this cannot continue to operate as a stop sign. It needs to have some higher form of traffic control, and what we're proposing there is a traffic signal. New crosswalk. We're going to have crosswalks across all approaches, again, at this intersection. Bulb outs at the corners, as we talked about before. A two-stage pedestrian crossing with a raised island. This warrants just a little bit of extra time to explain. When we initially sat down and prepared designs for this intersection, it included a crosswalk across the west leg of the intersection. The right turn lane was in here tied up against the through lane. The corner was more squared off, and there was a crosswalk here. We submitted that proposed design to the Montana Department of Transportation. They gave it some thorough consideration and realized that with the very high volume of right turns coming down here, they're going to be turning right on a green ball at the same time that pedestrians are trying to cross here. And just the sheer volume of that vehicle traffic brought concerns to the Highway Department. They expressed those concerns to the university and the city and to WGM, and really we tended to agree with them that having that situation wasn't the safest possible design. But at the same time, the city and the university really wanted to accommodate all modes of travel at this intersection. So they asked WGM to go back to the drawing board at this intersection and take another look at what we can do to allow that crossing to occur safely. And what we've come up with and are currently proposing to MDT is basically a two-stage pedestrian crossing. This is a raised concrete island created by tapering the right turn lane away from the through lane, creating some space in here. So pedestrians who want to get from this corner to this corner cross in two stages. When Arthur Avenue is stopped and has a red light, they can cross safely to the island. They'll be accompanied by those people who are trying to cross all the way across this way. They'll go as far as the island, then wait for Arthur Avenue to receive and Madison to receive the green light, and then they'll cross the rest of the way, the right turn, never having to cross the right turn while it's moving, with the obvious exception of right turn on red. But in that case, the right turns come to a stop, and in addition, the pedestrians are right there in front of them rather than off to the side. We feel this is a much improved safety condition over the original design. Appreciate MDT's feedback on it, and this is the way that we're currently proposing to go. The bike lane adjacent to the through lane over here. You'll see how it gets there in a moment when we look at the next slide. Shared bike lane northbound, which is a continuation of this shared bike lane we saw a moment ago down here. And a new bike lane westbound on 5th Street. What will we add if we have some extra money? Well, we'll add some more green pavement markings through here and through the intersection, and the crosswalk treatments as well. Madison, north of 5th Street, south of the bridge. There's a site obstruction over here. It's primarily brush and growth, but there's also a guardrail in there. We're going to take a look at what can be done to improve sight distance through this corner. And in particular, with the new traffic signal down here, it becomes even more important that you be able to see down here, see either the signal or the back of Cute. There's a difficult bike lane merge. Bike lane comes down this side, then all of a sudden there's also one on this side, and getting across there is challenging to say the least. Events traffic exiting the UM, and I keep talking about events traffic, concerts and sporting events, but the university also has a real concern about being able to evacuate the campus in case there was the need to do so. And TJ can maybe talk more to you about that if you're interested in that. I know he's been involved in putting together that plan, but part of that plan to be able to evacuate the campus quickly, should the need arise, includes having two exiting lanes, both northbound up Madison and westbound on 5th Street. So that's what, and we'll get back to what it looks like here in just a second, but that's part of what we're talking about when we say events traffic exiting the UM. So lack of a trail connection over here. There's a wonderful trail system along the river, an underbridge on Madison Street, and a trail connection you can see comes up this way, but no connection over to this corner of Arthur. So what are we proposing? Advanced warning signs to make people aware of the traffic signal before they run up on it. Looking at removing the site obstruction in this location, a bike lane merge with the option of use of the sidewalk. So as the bike lane comes down Madison, when you reach this point, you have two options as the bicyclist. One, you can merge across traffic to join the bike lane, which goes down to the traffic light and is adjacent to the through lane here. If that's not a maneuver you're comfortable with. You also have the option of, we're going to lay down the sidewalk curb here. You can exit onto the sidewalk. Instead of a 5 or 6 foot sidewalk here, this will be 8 to 10 feet in this area, wide enough for a shared use path. And you can exit onto the sidewalk there and come down, cross through the intersection as a pedestrian, and then re-enter the bike lane south of the intersection if weaving across here isn't something you're interested in attempting. There's also the continuation of the shared bike lane northbound, a single lane exit with option for 2 lanes during events here. So the existing width is maintained, part of it is striped out, part of it becomes a bike lane, and then we have the through lane in the middle. This can then be converted during events to 2 through lanes coming up here and exiting over the bridge with some manual traffic control for this leg. And then a future planned trail connection. There's an irrigation channel in here and a very significant change in elevation of grade from this location to this location, which would probably require a long, perhaps fairly meandering path to make ADA grades up there. It's not something that we are able to accommodate construction of in this project and with this project's budget. So that's something for a future project. And then green bike lanes if we have the money to do so. 6th and Maurice, the existing conditions, critical items that we take into account is the very high volume of Highway 12 traffic making this left turn. No crosswalk on this approach. Long pedestrian distances across the intersection. Heavy bike and pedestrian traffic at this location, one of the heaviest pedestrian locations in all of the city of Missoula, without question. Events traffic entering the university. So what are we proposing? Bulb outs on all 4 corners, as you've seen on most of the other intersections. A new crosswalk on the north leg. A new bike lane here on 6th Street, eastbound, the continuation of the one we saw moments before. A new protected bikeway. If you've been downtown on Higgins since the end of this summer, you've seen where the protected bikeway was constructed down there, separated from the vehicle traffic by the parked cars. Same kind of a concept here. In this case, it would be separated by this 3-foot painted median. This would be a 2-lane bikeway with 5 to 5.5 foot lanes in both directions. A single entry into the university where there's 2 lanes currently going in now. There'll be 1, again, striped out to allow 2 during events. And if we have the money to do so later on, green bike lanes and colored or concrete crosswalks. Finally, the intersection of 5th and Maurice, one of the more complicated intersections really because of all the modes of use that use it and the volumes in each mode. Things that we took into consideration included the high volume of US 12 traffic going northbound, the bicycle and pedestrian vehicle conflicts, particularly crossing the east leg. As you're all, I'm sure, well aware, the bike path from the underbridge comes up here. Pedestrians and bicycles alike make their way to this location. And because the queue of traffic is so bad, and particularly in the PM peak hour right after 5 o'clock, this queue backs up past the stadium at times. By the time you've waited 5 minutes plus to get your turn at the stoplight, at the stop sign, oftentimes the drivers are real anxious to get out and don't give due consideration to the fact that while they're looking to their left for a gap in oncoming Highway 12 traffic, there's pedestrians and bicycles waiting to cross in front of them from their right. So a real potential safety problem. High crash rate, as we talked about earlier on. Wrong way vehicle maneuvers coming out of the parking lot. This is one-way northbound. No crosswalks and long crossing distance, events traffic. So what are we proposing here? A number of things, starting with bulb outs at the intersections, a new crosswalk on the north leg, a new stop sign. So there'll be a two-way, or I guess the best way to put it is all-way stop control at this intersection. So not only will the 5th Street approach stop as it currently does today, Also, the Maurice Avenue northbound approach. Now that vast majority of that Highway 12 traffic is moved off of this approach, we can have both legs stopped, safer condition for vehicles entering the intersection from the east, and that long queue that we talked about moments ago, with this traffic having been so dramatically reduced, this queue becomes very, very manageable, very short. And something you could see on the simulation, if you'd like, later on. Reduced intersection width, so that pedestrian crossings are easier and the intersection is more defined. Separated sidewalk and bicycle facilities here on the north side. This is still a work in progress, but the general concept is that if the pedestrians would cross here onto the sidewalk, then could cross either to the sidewalk that goes up and over the bridge, the sidewalk that goes to the parking lot, or take the path to the underbridge. Meanwhile, bicycles also can cross here from the protected bikeway onto the bicycle path. The protected bikeway that we discussed down here continues on up to this intersection. New bike lane westbound. What would we add? We would add bicycle pavement or green pavement markings through here to further define the fact that you have vehicles approaching a stop bar with both pedestrians and bicycles crossing in front of them, as well as the green bike lanes, as well as the colored or patterned concrete crosswalks. Yes, thank you. Kevin reminds me that one of the things that we're doing here, in addition to everything we've already discussed, is now that there's not the volume of traffic, there's no longer the need for two northbound lanes on Maurice, and so it's going to be converted to a two-way street. So there'll be both northbound and southbound traffic on Maurice Street. So the cross-section is essentially parallel parking, a southbound lane, and a northbound lane, and the protected bikeway. So the next steps. Public involvement, which is ongoing, part of what we're doing here tonight. We're going to continue to hear comments from folks and encourage you to continue to provide input. We try to incorporate as much as we can. There are always budgetary restrictions and also just practical engineering facts that we have to deal with. The MIPA environmental document is nearing completion. That'll be is a categorical exclusion. That'll be completed soon and signed. Oops, sorry. The final design and construction documents, we hope to have those ready to submit to MDT. MDT is a key partner in this. I've mentioned them a couple of times. They're going to be reviewing this because, again, it is their facility, US Highway 12, for the most part through this project area. We will be submitting plans to them for review in early January with the hope that we will be in position to bid the project in March, begin construction at the end of the spring term, and if all goes well, have it substantially complete before the beginning of the fall term. So, with that said, I'm going to encourage some questions. I don't imagine I'll have to encourage very hard. I'm going to ask the city and the university to go ahead and help me field these. Yes, sir.
Can you show us how you picture the traffic merging, the north traffic on the bridge?
I could. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get back there, but we're going to do it. There we go. It's not a merge so much as it is a convergence. You're going to have one northbound lane coming up this leg of Madison and going into the inside lane, and one northbound lane coming up this leg of Madison and going into the outside lane. The two don't merge so much as they simply come together. There's two lanes continuing across the bridge.
So you're looking at cars mostly on part of it, and the other part you're looking at trucks. How do you imagine the trucks are going to intervene to get to the turnoff when they get up to the lanes? That's Broadway or?
I wish I would have, I did measure it, I wish I had measured it recently. There's actually quite a long distance between here and Broadway. And
Could you repeat the question? questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. Steve's asked me to repeat the questions. The question was twofold. One, how do the two lanes merge when they reach this point here? As I explained, it's more convergence than a merge. And then his second follow-up question was, what about the trucks that are in the inside lane and want to get over to the outside lane to make the right turn onto Broadway? And there's actually quite a distance in between here. We really feel that that's not going to be problematic in terms of that crossing maneuver and the weaving maneuver. And we need to remember, too, that the volume of traffic coming up on this leg is not going to be nearly so significant as it is today. So the amount of traffic they need to cross in front of to make that lane change isn't going to be that great. And I saw something else here, and it slipped my mind, something important I wanted to tell you. Hopefully it'll come back. Oh, it has to do, I mentioned earlier on in my presentation that I would get back to why a shared bike lane rather than a dedicated bike lane northbound coming up Madison. And the reason really is right here. We didn't feel comfortable with a dedicated 5 or 6 foot bike lane here coming up, reaching this merge point, and those bikes finding themselves between two high volume, potentially fast moving lanes of traffic, and the bicycle is in the middle. We really felt that we didn't want to encourage the use of that lane by novice riders. It's part of the reason why we put the Sharrow in. Those more expert bike riders can be in the lane and take the lane once they get to the merge point, rather than coming up and being between two lanes. So next question, Phil.
Actually, 2 real quick questions, Mark. One on the protected bike lane at the north end of it. How do bikes that have come from the north get into that protected bike lane? I couldn't quite tell from the diagram exactly what the access is to get into the southbound protected bike lane.
And okay, so he's got a two-part question, or 2 questions. His first question was bicycles rather, arriving from the north at this location, how do they get into the bike lane, the protected bikeway south of the intersection? I'm going to keep going here.
That's the first question. So there's
That's his first question. So here's the location we're talking about. When you come up the bike path, you'll come up to this location, hopefully yield to the pedestrians crossing in front of you, come to this location. So I mentioned earlier that there's 2 stop signs here, it might actually be 3, and you would enter the intersection here and cross. While this traffic is stopped, you would be essentially the 3rd leg of the intersection.
So that protected bike lane or equivalent facility carries on across the intersection.
Correct.
Okay, and then my other question, the new bike lane eastbound on 6th, where does it begin?
Second question is the new bike lane eastbound on 6th, where does it begin? He's talking about this bike lane here. It continues into the intersection, and then it's up to the university to decide what they're going to do with it on this side. Where does it begin? It begins on the west side of Arthur. So when we redo striping there, it will develop it there, but it doesn't continue, at least not on this project, any farther than the immediate vicinity of the intersection. Another thing that bears pointing out is this protected bikeway. When it comes down through the intersection, it comes down here and it currently ends by running into the angled parking out in front of, I believe it's the law building. The university is having internal discussions as to what they're going to do here to get rid of that issue and provide a more logical terminus to that. Yes, sir.
You call it a protected bike lane, but it's only being protected by a 3-foot piece of, there's nothing there, no barrier, right?
There's no barrier. His question was the protected bikeway, what's protecting it? I mentioned a 3-foot painted median, and that is correct. There is no raised curb at that location. There is no line of parked cars as there is downtown. But that method of protection, it defines where the bike space is intended to be, and it is a method that is used in other cities. So.
Why not a raised?
Why not a raised? The follow-up question was why not a raised median? I think there's cost considerations, there's drainage considerations for stormwater on the street, potentially truck turning issues, snow removal. So, yes, sir.
You mentioned categorical exclusions in the MPPA. Why was that?
I'm not an environmental specialist. We have other folks on our team who are preparing the CADX, the categorical exclusion. There are certain level of improvements that you can do that don't raise to the level of requiring an environmental assessment, because what we're doing here is primarily within the existing curbs, has a fairly small new physical footprint on the ground. I wish I could give you maybe a better answer as to what types of projects fall into categorical exclusions, but that's why. It's just the level that it rises to. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
What are you looking at for the construction time overall? Is it going to be a multi-year project, or you do one quarter at a time, or is it going to be just over the course of one season?
The question was, how long do we anticipate this taking? Is it something we can build in one season, or are we going to build part of it now and then build part of it later? The answer to that question is, it is our intent, our hope, that this would be built starting in the spring, sometime mid-May, right after graduation and classes from the spring session let out, and traffic volumes here reduce, and be complete before the fall term begins, at least substantially complete to the point where it's traffic-wise, it's operational. So that is the intent.
Mark, can I interject?
Yes, Jerry, please.
Part of the key to making that time schedule is our ability to move this project along and get it bid out as quick as we possibly can, for two reasons. One, the sooner we can get a contractor at least on board, then he can start ordering and planning materials, so he's ready to hit the ground when that construction period opens up. The other one is, the sooner we get this project started and we avoid inflationary costs, the more money we're likely to have in the project to do some of the improvements. So there's a two-step thing in there, that the quicker the project goes, the more likely it is that we might have extra money to do more.
Yes, ma'am.
Speaking about money, could you show us the budget for this? The portions that the main players that you named are going to be paid, or percentage thereof? And do a projection of what it might cost if it costs more.
You want to handle that one? The question was, what is the project going to cost? Each of the players that were mentioned earlier, who's kind of paying what share? Those players being MDT, the city, and the university through the SID. So.
Right, and step over here by the mic. It's roughly a $1.75 million project. The primary assessee, the university, has about 1.25 million is what the SID was created. There's some administration cost in there. And so roughly the in-kind labor from the city is a little bit over 200,000, and then the projections on the signals that MDT is proposing are a little bit over 250,000.
So when you say university for 1.75 million, do you mean the University of Montana, or do you mean the university people who live there?
The University of Montana, and it's 1.25 is their portion.
It's not the university neighborhood,
No,
it's the University of Montana.
The SID that was set up was specifically designed to include just purely university property. We have an agreement, and that includes the people on 5th, 6th, and Arthur. We've got four private property owners in the 5th, 6th block. The university has agreements with those property owners that we're going to be paying their SID. So it is not going to impact any of the private property owners that are currently have property within the university area. The thing that lets us do this, of course, is the SID. We don't have to come up with $1 million the first year of this thing. We will be paying that off over a 20-year time period.
Yeah, what do you mean by the university property? The property on the 600 block of 6th Street?
We took in, what is, Steve, can you recall the area? We took in the property on the 600 block of,
Can we get to the graphic, Mark?
Yeah,
The overview?
yeah. Or just
Yeah, the overview. Because the area, the SID is really, that's a very good question. The really key is that there's no public assessments, there's no property owner assessments for adjacent properties. The university, the state of Montana, is budgeted this over 20 years to pay their SID off.
Where's the,
They're right under your trigger finger there.
so
Okay, go ahead.
it should be right here.
we took in that,
That and
the parking lot,
the parking lot. yeah.
Right, so
and the
adjacent
block to
properties
the
here,
south.
adjacent properties here, adjacent properties basically on this side. I don't know, were these taken in?
Yes.
Okay. So,
And that SID was an action by the city in collaboration with the university through the spring and summer of this year. So if you've got any questions about the SID creation or the boundaries or how that came about, that's all a public record through the city council.
Other
Yeah.
questions?
That,
I'm sorry, Jerry.
that also means that part of the reason why we've limited the scope of this project, and the scope does not go outside those boundaries, because if we took construction outside those boundaries, then by SID law, we would have had to include the properties that are adjacent to any improvements in the SID. So the boundaries of the SID limit the scope of the project. So we don't impact the citizens of Missoula outside of the university area.
Yes, sir.
So, the large emphasis on US Highway 12, the traffic that it brings through here, the fact that they have their rules and why we can't do things certain ways and stuff, but I don't hear any federal money for this. Is there federal money? We're shortening their highway from, right? We're making the travel distance from coast to coast shorter.
They are. The question is there any federal money? There is no federal money in this project. There is some state money, there is city money, but there is not federal money in this project. And that was by design. Yes, ma'am.
When I come off the bridge headed south, because of the steep incline, I have trouble staying under the speed limit without hitting the brake or gearing down, and then you're going to put a traffic signal there to address any potential problems you might see with that.
The question was having to do with the vehicle speeds coming across the bridge and into the study area, and they're arriving at a traffic signal. What we will do is, as I mentioned before, we will put up signs in advance, and this is primarily repeat drivers through here, so it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise to drivers that there is a traffic signal at this location. And you are, after all, although you're on a U.S. highway route, you are in the middle of Missoula, in the middle of downtown Missoula, and so speeds shouldn't be, practically speaking, shouldn't be that as high as probably they are.
Well, that's true. And then what about traffic backup in the meantime while you're waiting at that signal?
She asked about traffic backup at this signal. There will, of course, as with all traffic signals, going to be some queuing. We can look a little bit later on at the traffic simulation and the traffic model. We don't expect there to be great extensive queuing. You know, an interesting thing about happens today, we talked about the PM queue here. The AM queue, because of all the pedestrians crossing on this approach, there's periods in the AM peak hour where traffic wishing to enter the university stops to allow a lot of pedestrian traffic and backs up to the point where it interferes with the operations of this intersection. And the operations of that intersection are so interfered with that it begins to back up this way. So there's already queues of traffic out here. We're not just shifting them around, we're actually reducing the amount of queue overall in the study area. So many hands. Yes, sir.
Much of what we're dealing with today is the legacy of something that happened 100 years ago when the Milwaukee Railroad came through here. The reason the Madison Street Bridge is so high because we had to get over the trains. When I see the the bike facilities that will allow me to go up over that bridge. I had a birthday recently, and I'm going to have more, and I'm not going to ride my bike on that. But it leads me to ask the question, that bridge has got to be at least 50 years old. What's its life expectancy, and when might we anticipate it being replaced? And is there anything that we're doing today in this design that is anticipating that bridge's replacement? And does that affect what we're going to do today so that we don't have to do this over? I'm still hoping that on someone's desk is the plan to make that connection that you said would be too hard along the toe of the slope down to the riverfront trail system and the underbridge, which I think is a lot more convenient and appropriate for bicycles.
Try and summarize the question. It has to do with the fact that the bridge grades are as steep as they are because the bridge was constructed to allow the railroad to pass underneath. Railroad no longer passes underneath. Is there anything that we're doing now that would prohibit that grade when that 50-year-old bridge needs to be replaced? And I'm sorry, I have no idea when that date is going to be. Is there anything we're doing now that's going to impact the ability to make good design decisions later on? And the answer, I believe, to that is no. We're doing now what needs to be done for this project, but I can't think of anything that we're doing that adversely impacts the decision-making or the options that would be available on that project, on some future project to replace the Madison Street Bridge, which such project doesn't exist at this point. The second part of that question was to really encourage continued thinking about adding a bike connection from the underbridge along this side to Arthur, and hopes that someone is still thinking about that even though it's not a part of this project. And I would say that it is actually and the active transportation plan, thank you, not the non-motorized transportation plan. The active transportation plan, one of the things that was brought out in that process is a connection there. It is, and for that matter, also an improved connection through the parking, what's currently through the parking lot on the north side for bicycle traffic going the other way. So those are still in the mix, just not part of this project.
Prime idea for a neighborhood project.
Exactly. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question concerning 6th. 6th is narrowed to one lane, according to your map. At what point does it go from 2 lanes to 1 lane? Is it all the way from Brooks to Arthur, that it's 1 lane?
No, ma'am.
Or, all right, what is the merge situation when traffic, isn't there going to be a tremendous backup as that traffic coming off of Brooks tries to merge into the one lane here? And the second question is, where are those biomass trucks going to go?
Okay, it's a two-part question. The first question has to do with, whoops, didn't mean to do that, but maybe I'll do that anyway. The first question has to do with this 1 lane eastbound on 6th Street, and how far back towards Brook Street is it only 1 lane? And the answer to that question is, it's 2 lanes all the way back to Brook Street and all the way to Arthur. The change comes in that the second lane is now for left turns only, and so you still have 2 lanes. It's just the assignment of those 2 lanes. And you were concerned about merging. So there's not really the need to merge. There's a fairly balanced distribution of turns, at least during the peak hours, turns versus throughs once this becomes an option. So we looked at how many people are going all the way around, how many of those might opt to turn left here, and it's a balancing act. And some people may elect, rather than waiting to make the left turn, if they find it's faster, may still go around. There might be some of those. But ultimately, there is no merge point. It's just a decision point. Are you turning left or are you going through? The second part of the question has to do with the university's plans, potential plans for a biomass facility, and how would the trucks come in. And it's actually a really good question because it's part of what we had to take into account is truck turning. Part of the reason that this is striped the way that it is, rather than a big bulb out coming out here, is to make sure that we can get large trucks to be able to make this left turn around this corner. And so it's my understanding that those trucks will primarily be coming to and from the Broadway direction. So they'll be coming down Arthur, making the left, going straight into the university through Maurice, and then when they exit, coming out 5th and making the right and going up over to Madison Street Bridge.
What about folks coming in, the trucks coming in from the Bitterroot?
What about the trucks coming in from the Bitterroot? They will be coming in presumably on Brook Street and then coming up 6th Street and coming straight in here. And again, this project at the very least can accommodate them easily. We're not here necessarily to talk about the greater Missoula area and truck turning, but here it'll be fine. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the southbound direction on Maurice. It seems like the only people that could possibly be coming southbound would be people coming out of the university on 5th that would be making a left at that intersection, and it would just take them back into the university. So do you think there will be much demand for the southbound lane there?
The question was the added southbound lane on Maurice. I don't know if I can get there fast enough. I can answer the question faster than I can get to the slide. I said earlier there's no longer the need for 2 lanes northbound on Maurice, and so we're going to change it into a 2-way street. The question was, how much demand do you really anticipate for that southbound leg, that southbound direction of traffic? The point being that once you got there, you're kind of coming from the university and maybe just looping back too. And the fact is, we don't anticipate a lot of demand at all. But in the interest of creating network, giving options, giving that person who came out of the parking lot and is looking for a space, a way to get back in, and allowing facilities to be able to get back down into that portion of the campus without having to go out onto Arthur, it's an opportunity, but we don't really foresee a lot of traffic volume on that. Yes, sir, in the white sweater back there.
It was discussed when we first had our meeting with the 5-lane Reserve East, how many years ago? And it's been discussed since then. But I just want to kind of get the official view here. Why no roundabouts?
The question is, why no roundabouts? That this has a roundabout at the locations on Arthur Avenue, at the very least, has been talked about on and off for a long time, so why are we not doing roundabouts? I'm going to defer that question to my colleague, Jeremy Keene. He's a little bit more, I think, prepared to answer that one. So.
Need a bail on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Roundabouts have been talked about for a long time at these intersections. It's something that has been studied by a number of different engineers, including us. We think, while they have merit, this particular project is, because we're limited on funding and we're limited on the amount of right-of-way that we have to work with, roundabouts weren't an option that we could consider. We did look at them, but because these intersections are fairly constrained, it's a more cost-effective option to go with signals. Long-term, could a roundabout work in some of these intersections? Maybe. Some of the challenges with the roundabouts is most of the studies that have been done have said it would have to be more than a single-lane roundabout. So you're talking about multi-lane roundabouts, which are more challenging for pedestrians and bikes to use, and obviously require more right-of-way. And they're also more difficult to deal with events traffic. When you have a high flow of traffic coming all in one direction, roundabouts tend to be more difficult to accommodate that traffic. And so it would require more police traffic control during those events with a roundabout. But long-term, maybe that's something that we would see in the future. But right now, the project we have at hand, we aren't looking at roundabouts.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a concern about the 6th and Maurice intersection. That being without a stopping mechanism from 6th, how do you ensure the safety of pedestrians crossing on the north side of Maurice?
So her question was at the intersection of 6th and Maurice, and pedestrian safety crossing on the north side, and I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the part about the stop.
Because there's a heavy flow of traffic from 6th turning left onto the Highway 12 or whatever. So how do you ensure the safety of the pedestrians crossing on that north side?
Well, first of all, because there's the opportunity to travel northbound up Arthur now, most of the traffic that is the Highway 12 traffic will no longer be crossing 6 to get to Maurice. They'll have a new option now to take, so there'll be less volume of traffic there. And so there's going to be less of, same number of pedestrians, but a lot less cars crossing in front of them, or trying to cross through them. And in addition, the bulb outs and the tightened intersection will help to slow down traffic. And finally, there won't be 2 lanes of traffic making that left turn anymore. It'll be just a single lane of traffic. And from that lane, you can go either left through or right. So there'll be, when someone goes through or right, that'll create gaps in traffic for pedestrians. So I hope that answers that question. Yes, sir, in the red hat.
Yes, the part of the road that connects Arthur to the Madison Street Bridge, how wide are you going to widen Madison Street?
The part of the road that connects Arthur to the Madison Street Bridge, so I believe you must be talking about this section in here. That'll be widened to add that shared bike lane, which is in a neighborhood of about 15 feet.
So that's for the shared bike lane, which is mostly just for cars?
It's a shared vehicle/bike lane, yes. And that's why most of the lanes here are 11, 12 feet wide. That one's 15 because of the shared bike use in it. That's why I brought that up. Yes, sir.
The graphics in the dialogue room show 6-foot bike lanes next to parked cars, whereas I believe your graphics up here are showing 5-foot, which 5-foot bike lanes do not get cyclists out of the door zone. Can you clarify that discrepancy?
It'll be 6 feet in the area where there's bikes, next to parallel parking.
Great.
And it'll be 5 feet through the bulb out area, where there are no parked cars. Yes, sir.
In the past, when we've redesigned traffic flow, there's been consequences. When we shrunk down Broadway, we shunted a lot of traffic onto Spruce now, West Spruce. And when we realigned South Avenue to South Ocean Junction, we now see an increase in traffic on Mountain Street. Do you perceive any shortcuts here? Has there been any studies to see whether or not people might turn on Connell, for instance, go down Connell, all the way down to the theater, take a left on Maurice, continue on up past the Law Library, on up to the intersection, and go up the ramp. They're avoiding 2 traffic lights, for instance.
The question has to do with kind of the law of unintended consequences. If we make this change, are we going to induce traffic to take other routes? The answer is, I can't say for sure. We have talked about the possibility of, let me take a step back. I mentioned earlier that network-wide there's going to be significant improvement of operations. What I didn't emphasize was that there'll be some individual intersection movements that won't operate as well as today in order for that whole network to operate better. And one of those, we can go back, could be this left turn, which is kind of what I was getting at to a question a moment ago about some people maybe not electing to make this left, but to continue around the way that they go now on 6th and on Maurice. So, to try to get to your question, one of the things that we have talked about internally in our conversations with the city is the potential that some people may elect to take Higgins up to Broadway rather than going across 6th Street and taking Madison up to Broadway. There is that possibility. The eventuality of them getting off of the network and into the local streets is really beyond the scope of what we were analyzing within the traffic. So
you don't know?
I don't know. Yes, sir.
Suppose we get this all in place and you get it running for a couple of years and find out it's not working quite the way you'd like it for. You have a contingency plan to maybe go back and make part of those one-lane streets, two lanes again, and that sort of thing?
Question is, what if it doesn't work as well as we hope in a couple of years? What's the contingency plan? The thing to bear in mind here, I think, is that, as we tried to emphasize earlier on, this is a safety improvement project, not a capacity improvement project. And so we're not trying to add capacity to the network. At the same time, we're not deliberately going out of our way to make things any worse, and we're doing all that we can to ensure that we can move cars as efficiently as possible. If things were to begin to back up, I don't know. Steve, what's the patent answer for that one?
Once again, I'm Steve King. I'm City Public Works Director. The complaints will come to my office. So that's the first thing that I'm very aware of. And we've talked about long range. There is really no long range changes planned. There was, as Mark and Greg introduced, there was a more comprehensive project proposed previously that was not supported by the majority, and so that's really off the table. So what does the future hold? It really is unknown. Depends on traffic flows at the university, how successful ASUM transit is for park and rides. There's a lot of dynamics in the neighborhood, in the university, in the campus, and the future of our fleet and our modes. What's fuel prices going to do? All the other variables in the future. So we don't know that. We do know that this is vetted through the Department of Transportation, through the university, and through the city, that this works for what it is as far as a safety and operation with existing traffic flows. What the future holds is yet to be seen.
But from a city perspective, we would continue to monitor safety. And if there were improvements that were obvious or presented themselves or something, we would monitor that and have the ability to implement changes.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, Greg, is that always we're able to make tune-ups. We're always able to make some changes that could either change signal cycle times or other features. There's that ability for modification of existing traffic operations. What I think is really key here, the key is we're not reducing capacity of the existing system. In fact, for most of the movements, it's actually improving the operation of this system. Somebody was saying actually the trip is a little bit shorter. That's true, and it actually reduces some of the travel times for the majority of users. Will all users get all the benefit all the time? Absolutely not. It just can't be done within the existing curves. So that's really important, that this is not a reduction of capacity, reduction of accommodations for vehicular traffic. It maintains the vehicular traffic and accommodates the mixed mode of bike, peds, transit, and the cars.
Steve, is it also could be true to say that whatever we do here is intertwined with all of the network throughout Missoula? So we have to continue to improve all of our networks throughout Missoula. Reserve Street, Russell Street, 3rd Street, all of those north-south routes have to be continually addressed and improved to build capacity throughout the whole system.
Build capacity for all modes. So give people choices.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, it appears Steve said that there's no reduction in capacity, and that's true for everyday common traffic because you now have North Street northbound on Arthur, but there is only one lane eastbound into the university. So you have reduced the capacity of incoming traffic to the parking lot at the university because half of it's 2-lane currently, and it turns 2-lane and goes Van Buren. Well, it's 1 and 1, and you showed that there are 2 lanes going into the parking lot, but it's striped, so you only use 1.
Mark, do you have that delay slide?
You need to show that slide. It should down to the right from that.
I'm going to go back to a delay slide here in a moment. So let me reiterate the question. The question was having to do with the entrance to the university at the intersection of 6th and Maurice Streets, and the fact that we are going to have just 1 lane entering the university, and isn't that a reduction in capacity? Because there's currently
only for the university.
because there's currently 2 lanes going into that parking area. Okay. However, you can only enter those 2 lanes from 1 lane on 6th Street, because the inside lane you're forced to turn left, the outside lane you could go left through or right. So you still have 1 lane going in. It's just you only have 1 lane to head into instead of 2. And so it's within the circulation system of the parking lot, there may be some reduced capacity. That has to do really more with what the university opts to do once you get past the immediate confines of this project.
And then on
Just a second. And getting back to the delay slide that we looked at earlier, network-wide, this is during the PM peak hour. Again, just want to emphasize, we're seeing significant, number of stops goes up by 26%. It's because we're introducing a traffic signal. When you introduce traffic signals, you're going to increase the number of stops. But overall, network-wide, the combination of things that we're doing, we're going to see a reduction in delay during the PM peak hour that the modeling at least forecasts of 75%. Is it truly going to be 75%? Now, no one will know until we implement it, and somebody maybe does a before and after study, but it's going to be significant. Yes, Bob?
I do like a lot of the changes you've shown us tonight. There's a huge concern about the stoplight and the speeds coming down the hill, especially with that bike crossover maneuver, people looking up at the light. So I'm very concerned about bike and motor vehicle safety with the speeds of people coming down that hill. Can you talk about anything you all have tossed around to mitigate that safety? And then when do you want comments into your office by?
Okay, I'll take the second question first. The second question was, when do we want comments to us by? Is there a deadline of some sort? Practically speaking, because we need to have the plans prepared by early January in order to get them submitted to keep on the construction schedule that we're committed to, we need those comments just as soon as you could get them to us, certainly before the holidays at the very latest. The first part of his question had to do with traffic coming down the hill from the Madison Street Bridge toward the new signal, and the fact that there's that bike lane that crosses in front of that traffic. And might the driver be distracted by kind of watching the signal and coming down that hill, and it's already higher speeds, and what is the safety concern? And it's a really great question, Bob, and we have juggled that question several times. We've put it down on paper and even submitted it once to MDT in a different fashion. And there's no ideal solution because you're going from 2 lanes to a dedicated right turn lane. If, as in many locations on southbound Reserve Street, for example, you have 2 lanes and then you're developing a right turn lane on the outside of that, your bike lane can come right through there. It's a fairly standard configuration. It's not what we're doing here. We have 2 lanes and one becomes a right turn lane, and you have to move the bike traffic through there. So what are the options? One option would be to eliminate bike traffic through that movement. Put them all up onto the sidewalk. Now, let's bear in mind that we don't want to necessarily go there, but the city, in its continuing monitoring of this project, that may be a decision they have to make for safety reasons down the line. But the real thing to understand here is there are options. There is the Madison Street underbridge, and for those drivers who really want to go up and over, they can take the lane. So there are options. It's not an ideal situation. Yes, sir, in the back.
Connected with that, as cyclists are making that choice to either get on the sidewalk or cross that lane of traffic, I imagine a lot of cyclists wanting to turn right onto 5th, just as the cars are turning right onto 5th. And I imagine that a lot of cyclists in doing so are going to hop onto the sidewalk, although I don't quite understand how that works. Hopping onto the sidewalk, as you said, it widens out for that multi-use. And then at the end of the sidewalk, they're going to be merging back onto the 5th into the flow of traffic, and I wonder if you considered that merge.
They would have to, I'm sorry, Greg, did you have a response you wanted to offer?
I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, I mean, one is they have to pay attention to the, at that point, they're controlled by the light.
Right, but there's no other way for cyclists to turn right onto 5th unless you're just taking the lane of traffic, which is obviously an option, but using those facilities.
Right. Yeah, you wouldn't want a bicyclist to make a right turn from the bike lane. If they're going to make a right turn onto 5th westbound, they would come down either on the sidewalk or in the traffic lane, and if they're in the traffic lane, wait for a green light, or if they're on the sidewalk, they would have to make their way down off of the curb and onto the street. as a pedestrian.
I guess my point is, as a cyclist, I can foresee many other cyclists taking the sidewalk and then trying to merge back on it. So you might consider.
Thank you. Yep. Yes, sir.
I remember at an earlier stage of this project being told that Jeanette Rankin was not actually a park. And so I just wanted some clarification about what it is.
I'll try, and if I'm wrong, the city will correct me. It is a wide spot in the MDT Highway 12 right-of-way, officially. It is.
So it's not like we're not losing parkland dedication at all.
That's correct. The question, I'm sorry, the question was, Steve, answer it. I'll reiterate it and let Steve, because he didn't like my answer. The Jeanette Rankin Park, as it's known, is this area in here. His question was, or his comment was, as he passed that it's not truly a park, and can we clarify legally what that space is?
And Mark's answer was correct. It's not a dedicated parkland, and that's a legal definition of the land use. Dedicated park versus other uses of property. This property is state right-of-way. It's state right-of-way, and if you will, it's a wide landscape area of the state right-of-way that has traditionally been used for park activities. Ironically, I think that with the changes and the crosswalks that are being built, that the park area will be more accessible than it is now. Some of the traffic configuration will allow maybe more public use of the park. There is going to be less square footage of park. We talked about taking approximately a 15-foot lane out of this portion of it, but there will be a substantial portion of this right-of-way for park use and public use will sustain.
Steve, if we ever get to the point where Jeff made the thing where we can reduce the bridge and lower the thing, this whole area is going to be totally reconfigured, and NDT is going to retain that right-of-way use, so they have options of improving this 10, 15 years down the road. How long have we been waiting for Russell Street?
Don't start off.
Do you have a question? Yes.
At one time, and I may have been misinformed because this happened before, but there was some discussion about 5th and 6th Street, I believe, being two-way, so that you could actually come across the Madison Street Bridge, take a left and go down Stadium Way without having to go all the way around through the parking, through the campus, and then just to get around the backside of the campus. Was that discussed in that original plan, and was it taken away on this plan? And will this plan stop that from ever happening with the way you have it, or is it still lend itself?
The question is this section of 5th Street in here, and for that matter, this section of 5th Street in here. There's been some discussion in the past of this becoming two-way, so that the entire campus loop is two-way, opening up options for circulation. Is there anything that, first of all, did we evaluate whether or not that should be part of this project? And second of all, is anything we're doing now going to preclude that from happening in the future? Without getting too far afield, the answer is yes, we certainly did consider that. We looked at a lot of options. One option included looking at a roundabout here, and then that making it feasible for this left turn to occur. With the angle that things are at here now, it's difficult to envision being able to make a left turn effectively and efficiently through there, and especially for larger vehicles. But with a roundabout at that location would make that possible. Also looked at, what would it mean long-term as an entrance to the university for this to come straight in and as an entry statement. And then this would become two-way. Just a lot of ideas were thrown about. But ultimately, it wasn't part of this project to try and create the ability to make a left turn at this location. Are we doing anything to preclude that in the future? I don't see that we are. We're not changing the existing options. I don't believe that we're really doing anything that would prevent that from happening into the future.
I think along those lines, one of the important things to remember is we're working with a very small amount of money for a project like this. This is kind of a bare bones type project to get some safety improvements. The kinds of things that would really make a dramatic change here, you're looking at several orders of magnitude difference. So this is a $1.7 million project. The project that was proposed earlier with the 5-lane alternative, I think, was $4 to $5 million. So just you have to think about what we have to spend here and what the future might hold in terms of funding transportation improvements.
Jerry,
Yeah.
since the university owns most of that land on 6th and 5th, where the houses are, what is their long-term goal for that land?
The question is, what's the university's long-term goal for this block in here?
And next block, too.
And the next block to the south?
Yeah, the university's long-term plan is to buy those properties up when and if they become available.
They own most of them right now.
They own all but 4. But it's those 4 private homeowners that partner with the university, and there's no way we have any intentions whatsoever forcing them to do anything. It will be strictly at their own determination as to what they want to do.
Well, what is their goal to do with that land? Are they evidently going to put more
Is Kevin here?
buildings or something in, so you're going to have more traffic?
We don't really have a real long-range plan for what to do with that piece of ground right now.
This project would open up opportunities, though, by removing the Highway 12 traffic from bisecting the existing campus from those properties. It opens up options. Yes, sir.
I'm Dan Burke with the Montana Association for the Blind. So my comments are sort of following up some discussion before the meeting. The signal will require some sort of alternative, signal for blind folks. I would really like to have like a vibrotactile kind of signal. If we're required to put them in, then that's what we would want. The notion that putting more noise into the environment is going to be safer for blind people is kind of hard to support. So, in fact, it's more of a danger, I believe. So that would be my preference there. And the other issue I was thinking about on the bulb outs, I'm all for shortening the walk across the road, but there needs to be some kind of a bulb out system that's not, the ones downtown, for example, the new ones down there on Spruce and Pine on Higgins, they're flat, featureless, wide, and they're not good to follow as a cane traveler. You get to where it's time to stop and wait, and I feel a little vulnerable because I never really know where I am, especially when the snow is cluttering it up. So down there it's not as big a deal, even though I'm sure there are people on there talking on their cell phones are going to cut those corners sometime when you stand there. But on higher traffic areas like on Arthur, 5th and 6th, that would be a consideration. So something more grooved in terms of slanting to the curb, et cetera, would be probably work better.
I appreciate those comments, in particular the latter half of your comments about the bulb outs and the way that they're laid down and the difficulty that presents to the vision impaired. And we will certainly be taking that into account. There's new I haven't heard, is ProWag federal? There's new federal.
It's a draft federal document, hasn't been finalized.
There's a new draft federal document, not yet finalized, but adopted in its current state by MDT, and they'll adopt its final state, I'm sure, when it comes out. It's known as ProWag. It's basically, I forget what the acronym is for, but Public Rights of Way, PROW, Accessibility Guidelines, thank you. Public Rights of Way Accessibility Guidelines. It's one of the first projects in Missoula that is going to be designed with that as a key design criteria. And one of the criteria of that is the requirement for vibrotactile pedestrian push buttons on all approaches at signalized intersections. So the answer to the first part of your question is that yes, those will be included in the signal design. Yes, ma'am.
You have spoken of the bulb outs, and the bulb outs at the rattlesnake has been kind of a disaster. The question here would be, once you have snow removal, as you have right now, how are you going to get, what are you going to do with all the snow when you've got the bulb out, other than just shoving it into the bike lanes or narrowing the traffic range?
I'll take that. Steve, do you want to step over by the microphone for the benefit of our TV audience?
So the question was, what are the bulb outs going to do for snow maintenance? Where's the snow going to go, especially at the intersections, and is it going to be pushed into the bike lanes? And so what is part of the features here, there's a couple of good features. One is that there's remaining boulevard areas, and the boulevard areas are intended for not only separation of the pedestrians from the traffic, but also for snow storage. That's one of the advantages of a boulevard area. So most of this has boulevards. Where it doesn't have boulevards, we would plow to the center and have snow berms toward the center of the road, as you see in many of the downtown areas. So what I expect on Arthur is that we would have plowing to the center and removal, and on the boulevard areas on 5th and 6th, we would have that as plow to the shoulders and out of the bike lanes and into the boulevard areas.
What do you call them, boulevards?
It's the landscape area between the curb and the sidewalk is the boulevard area I'm referring to. So that provides the dual purpose, the trees, the separation, snow storage. I love boulevards.
Yes, sir.
So you have this bike crossover as you're coming south off of Madison. Why did you not consider a bike crossover and a bike lane going north from Arthur onto Madison, crossing over the right-hand lane once they merge?
Are we talking about here?
No, up where they merge.
Here.
Yes.
The reason that we didn't do it here is because if you had a dedicated bike lane coming up along this side, when it reached the convergence point, that bicyclist would find itself in the middle of two moving streams of traffic, having then to cross over. Here, we're limited in our options. Here, we're not. We can get rid of it, and you still have a good route either by taking the lane or by coming around on the bike lane facility that goes around this way. It's a little bit farther out of your way, but it's not particularly steep or difficult, and it's a safer route that can still accommodate the movement without putting those bikes into that precarious situation. And so we evaluated the options, and that's what, in consultation with the city, the university, and MDT, what was arrived at as being the best option. Somebody, yes.
I paid attention to our plans for this area over 3 decades anyway. And in the past, NDT has been, I felt, quite invested in the psychology of traffic headed south over Madison Street Bridge, that it is a 4-lane divided limited access highway with huge big green interstate signs overhead, and that's why it's okay to drive 45 miles an hour over the bridge. And then people have to really slow down and start thinking a bit differently when they get over the hump and see what's ahead of them. Is NDT loosening up a bit on this little mini interstate in the middle of Missoula? I mean, is it willing to make some changes, perhaps in the future, when we rethink this whole thing? I mean, they've been pretty locked into a 1/4 mile of interstate in downtown Missoula for a while.
I guess, did everybody hear the question? I didn't hear anybody shake their head, so I'll assume so. I guess the best response that I can offer you to that is MDT has been a very helpful partner in putting this project together. I can't speak to their mindset. I don't believe that MDT has a single mindset. The district and Helena often have different ideas on things. And there's many people, good people in Helena that I work with on traffic issues, and they don't always have the same solution in mind to different problems. So I don't think there's any one mindset that MDT has. But they have been very helpful on this project in reviewing what we've proposed, in offering constructive feedback, and in even being willing to work with us to change this system. And right now they have 2 lanes coming up 6th and going up Maurice and crossing the bridge, and 2 lanes going the other direction. And in the future, there's going to be less lanes, not more.
Mark, can you get to the 6th and Arthur intersection?
Sure.
So, not only are we talking, and they're here tonight, I certainly can't speak for MDT, but I can speak for the cooperation that they've shown on this project to make it user-friendly. And not only user-friendly for the highway traffic, it continues to be that, but user-friendly for the university access, the neighborhood access, the mixed use that we want to accommodate is the bike ped. So look at the features here that are not a standard MDT features. The bike box, could you point to the green bike boxes? So allowing the bikes ahead of the cars physically, both visually and functionally, that's innovative and receptive from the Department of Transportation. They've responded to the city and university's request for that innovation on their highway, and they've tentatively agreed, preliminarily agreed to that design innovation. That's used successfully elsewhere. It's not new, but I'm pointing to that as evidence of MDT's partnership on this. The other thing is the green paint, and being able to try some of the highlights for vulnerable crossover areas and exposed areas for the bicycles. That is something that we really want to do, is prevent those, highlight those conflict areas, and they've agreed to consider the green paint as well. Those are just two examples of some of the accommodations that city working with MDT may accomplish if we can get through this project.
You've been waiting for a long time to ask your question.
Can you talk a little bit about street and intersection closures that you anticipate during construction?
I'm going to let Greg field that one because he did such a good job on the radio the other day.
Well, you know,
The question was, could we speak to street and/or lane or intersection closures during construction?
there will be street and lane closures. Yeah, I never want to, again, one is we need to get a contractor on board. If there are detours that work nicely, we can consider those. If there are, we would always advocate for lane closures, not street closures. As we did downtown Higgins, when we were working on four corners like that, with them being so close to each other, it doesn't take much for equipment working on this corner right here to be into this lane. It became evident that we wanted to close down one side at a time. If we can do, detours, we don't have a detour plan. We don't have that developed, but there are many ways we can get there.
I can see a high impact on bus movement in there.
Yeah, and we'll work with you.
Those meetings that you had for the downtown change every 2 weeks.
Right.
Those are really helpful to get ideas across.
Right.
Could that be continued?
Yes, I think we could commit to having construction meetings that were, bi-weekly to the public or something like that.
So we're going to have to wrap this up pretty soon. We'll take a couple of more questions, and then we will be here to answer maybe some one-on-ones. But I think are we supposed to be out of here by 9?
Yes.
So we're going to have to move quickly through the last couple of questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what person or persons are going to make the final decision as to whether or not to implement this plan, and when is that going to happen?
So the question is, what person or persons will make the final decision whether or not to implement this plan? Steve wants to answer that one.
There's two parties. There's the three parties to the agreement. It's the state money, and their state has advisory role on the design. We're not going to do something conflicting university interests. So that's one. They've provided the money for the materials, and so we're working with the university. They don't have the final approval. The Department of Transportation, MDT, has the final approval on the actual implementation of the project. It's on their state Highway 12, U.S. Highway 12, and they have the final authority of the design approval. The contract approval is through the city. The city's actually going to be advertising for low bids and receive sealed bids, and we go through a public bidding process. That public bidding process is approved by the city council. So the actual construction contract's approved by city council.
Okay, one more question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks for your work on this. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here. It looks like this is your intent, looking at your drawing, but just assure me that the bulb outs are going to be kept out of the bike lanes.
The question is, will the bulb outs be kept out of the bicycle lanes? And the answer is most definitely yes. You can see the separation. One good example is right here, where you have the bike lane and then the bulb out. So the bulb outs will be kept out of the bicycle lanes for sure. Okay, with that, I'm going to wrap up the formal question and answers. If you have more questions, we'll be here as long as you stay or until the university locks the doors. Thank you for your attention. Also, WGMgroup.com if you want to see the presentation online.